Hello and welcome to the End of Seeking podcast. We are at episode 20, having semi-accidentally taken a month off where it was supposed to be only 2 weeks, but here we are.
Yeah. Hi.
So yeah, we should probably introduce ourselves, seeing as it has been so long. My name is Imogen and I'm here with
Martin.
And here on this podcast, we generally are exploring the nature of awakening and being and life and all that encompasses. I was having a conversation with a fellow guide, let's call her, this morning, and we were just sharing a little of our experience of working with people. And something that came up and feels sort of lively for me right now is the nature of the sort of spiritual marketplace this day and age of sort of that salesy aspect of social media. Right. And we were both talking about how it's just really not our vibe at all. And I think
self-promotion and kind of a salesy vibe,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a balance because you have to, you know, if you're in service, let's say, and I think this is where we're going to go with this conversation about the nature of being in service to this. I mean, you got to make it known that you're here and available for that.
And just in this day and age, there's just so much information. There's so much out there, and there's so many people, sort of quotes, and I say this slightly cynically, but peddling their wares. And to me, it couldn't be further from how I feel about all of this.
Yeah.
And so I struggle with that. We were sharing our mutual struggle with that reality.
You seem to love the work.
Yeah.
But you know, it is that line where it becomes, you know, you have to. Well, how do I put the word out, and how do I the word promote? It's not, but you have to name it, don't you? I guess you have to stay in the pocket of just being real and not being. I think it's probably connected to this. It's connected to this idea about our motivations around doing things and that
why we do them.
And I like something Alan Watts said years ago, which was. You know, about what you should do in life. Well, you know, he said, if money wasn't a question, if that wasn't a question at all, if you didn't have to worry about, you know, paying the bills or anything, what would you do? What rings your bell? And do that, and you know, the livelihood will come from that.
Yeah, and that's been actually the guiding principle for me, anyway, for a number of years now. That's why I offered everything by donation, because it's like, do that which feels in highest service of life.
Yeah.
And to me, service is where I go, at least with service, is it's not about having an idea of what that service looks like.
Right. It's
about being in total surrender to life and seeing what life draws out of you within that surrender.
Well, you clearly have been progressively inclined towards offering your presence and your guidance to people in service of their own awakening, in service of their own discovery. self-discovery.
But that wasn't my idea of how I was going to serve life. You see, that's I guess what.
What was the idea before then? Did you have one?
I never would have guessed that I'd be doing this. Like, this wasn't my idea of how.
No, it was my idea.
Yeah, and that's what's been so wild about this whole thing is you've always had that sort of idea of a meditation teacher or you know, satsang
or guide or something. Yeah.
And it's funny how life sort of.
It's probably because I always liked having discussions. Yeah. I like talking about you know, the nature of reality and digging deep and all sorts of things. But I think it's interesting how you've taken up the mantle or the torch and carried it forward. Not that I don't, but I do it less than you.
Yeah.
It's much more vocational at one point. I'm more happy just to completely withdraw, actually, until I'm called. But then that's my nature, you know. In the human design thing, I'm a projector waiting to be invited. You know, whereas you're different. You're a generator. You can sort of invite yourself, kind of thing.
Yeah,
make yourself available, and.
Yeah, and so this is
and you've got a particularly tender heart, though, that is really very much in service to holding space for someone to come to their discovery and gentle guidance. You're very, it's very beautiful what you do.
But it's not what I thought my life purpose was, although it makes sense now. And so I guess, just trying to touch on, to me, what to be in service is, and letting go. For me, service is letting go of our ideas of what our life purpose is, letting go of our sort of the particularities of what feels, you know, big in life. Oh, I'm going to change the world. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. You know, like these kind of life purposes on these sort of very human ideas of purpose.
Well, it can limit it, can't it, in some ways?
Yeah, you can start to not really see.
My purpose is specifically this.
I think it's been hard to. You can't expect to find your purpose in life from your ideas of how you should behave. For me, you have to sink into the surrender and trust of life, and from there we find how life wants to use us and serve how we can be in best service to life. And to trust your sort of unique expression of that, and to not look to others, to not compare yourself with others. And that's the thing about, you know, like, and why I pointed out that thing of, you know, promoting yourself on social media and stuff like that. There can be a trap of, certainly for me anyway, a comparison of I should be doing it that way. I should be doing it in a particular manner. I should be turning up.
A function of comparison, isn't it? Which is never the right guide. How someone else does it is never the right guide.
Yeah, and so it's a really tender thing to.
Not that you can't learn from other people's methods, but sorry, you were saying.
Well, it's just that it's a really tender thing to sit in the pocket of that trust of your expression and what you feel called to do, and not want it to be something other than what it is, what you are, because you feel like you should be turning up a certain way. You should be speaking in a certain manner. You should be saying the right words or wearing the right clothes or doing it in a particular way. And it's quite hard to to really follow your own light, regardless of what messages you're sort of being.
Well, if you're surrounded by examples of other people doing it, whatever way they're doing it, I mean, it's so arbitrary to start comparing yourself and saying, oh, that's how it should be done then.
Yeah. And I think, to broaden this topic out into spiritual seeking, actually, and rather than spiritual seeking per se, but the path of awakening that we are all called forth to, and to not compare, to not sort of, you can use other people's viewpoints and paths and ways as inspiration, but as soon as there's comparison or a sense of I need to walk it in this manner, I think there's something really precious lost. To chart our own way is entirely necessary, I think, because although you can map out sort of the way things generally unfold for people, it's a completely unique experience. We are completely unique expressions of consciousness. And so to assume that there is a way that I should be.
Well, that's the trouble with and I've had to learn this one is not to universalize universally, because you can universalize sometimes, or broadly at least suggest that there's a common sense. But I sometimes do realize that what necessarily has worked for me will necessarily work for someone else, let's say, or
and vice versa. What has worked for someone else will necessarily be will work for me and be pivotal for me.
So it seems to me that the way forward then is to identify one's intuitive light. Actually, seems to be for me that's come to be the most important part of moving in any direction, particularly spiritually, in the spiritual path, for suggesting this for a seeker. You have identify that light of intuitive resonance in your heart that will go, this is for me, and that's not for me. And kind of trust that, because what else are you going to go on? You can be exposed to the most sublime teachings, let's say, and if it's not for you, and if it's not resonating with you, and you can't hear it, or it's not the time to hear it.
Well, I was about to say, it can be about timing very much.
So, by what light do we move in life, and actually it goes.
It reminds me of that conversation we were having earlier in the week about sort of hierarchy of values.
Yeah, that was a good one.
How having an understanding of the hierarchy of values in your particular moment of time, not as what should be your hierarchy of values, but as just as a description of what is. What do you value? I mean, and I know a lot of people kind of really don't like the idea of hierarchies, but we exist in hierarchies, of developmental hierarchies and competence hierarchies, and as a description. Again,
as a script. Well, it's like if I had a choice between eating mud or eating ice cream would be higher. So immediately, and you've sort of you've not established but identified a hierarchy.
Exactly.
We value certain things higher and lower than others. So identifying what your sort of values are, what your guiding lights.
What is your anchor point, your North Star in all of this is really helpful, particularly I think it's helpful of life generally, but particularly when you're getting into the nitty-gritty of awakening, it's very helpful to understand, well, what is my guiding light here? Is it peace, or is it safety of my ego, or is it truth? Is it that? And so that's why I touched on this, because you were talking about how, like, having that intuitive, that guiding light as being, your highest point is
somewhere there, like
is
that.
a very high value, I think, for a necessary high value for most. So I think when you have sort of an unclear view of your hierarchy of values, you can accidentally, when there's a lack of clarity there, you can accidentally be acting in life out of alignment with what is, as a description, important.
Yes.
Not as a moral judgment of
what's important to you,
but
find
as
out
a
what's
description.
Yeah.
And so I think gaining clarity in that is really helpful. And we actually just, the other day, something came up and we were talking about this and sort of discussing that actually there were some things that were being acted upon as if they were high values, but in actual fact they weren't so high. Yeah. And it's in the lack of clarity around that we sort of start acting out of accord with our own inherent best interests.
Yeah.
So having your guiding light, your intuition to truth, be actively and consciously your North Star, or your anchor point in life. It changes things in terms of comparison, in terms of feeling like you have to, and you should be something in life that you're not. It allows you to sink into that intuitive path that you find yourself on, that intuitive way of moving in life. And it's that point when you are surrendered to life. And I feel when you are surrendered to life, this is to me anyway, the description of being in service.
Right, so it's a much more universal description of what life looks like, living from the self, living from the truth of your own being moved by that intuitive knowingness, which is in fact connected. It's prior to any judgments of what's right and wrong. It simply is knowingness itself.
Yeah.
And it's particular to the individual. I mean, some might call it the voice of conscience, or in some ways it shows up like that. Like, no, that's not right, or that, and as such, it transcends any rules or any outward guidance. So, but you have to. It's funny. I was talking with someone the other day though about how, if you're not. I think it takes some time, practice, and real deep listening to really identify that light, that light of guidance, that intuitive knowingness, that felt sense of right, wrong, not in a moral sense, although sometimes it shows up that way, but correct and incorrect, yes or no. It takes some time to find that, and a lot of people just aren't there. We were basically talking about the need for, let's say, religious structures. Mm-hmm. The moral guidance in the world. Yeah. Call it moral guidance, but how to be in the world, and it's imperfect to I would argue to be guided by
an outer authority. But if you haven't got in touch with your inner authority, then it's better than nothing. Yes.
Because in the absence of anything like that, any guidance or any structures, people tend to go right off the rails. Can do. So
you're moving from different guidance and ego guidance.
Well, this is it. I wrote about this. The idea of going from the law to the spirit. That we need social. I would argue we know they're helpful to us collectively and individually to sort of orient ourselves until we discover our authentic, guiding, intuitive light.
Yeah. I come from the viewpoint that our authentic, intuitive light is actually always available to us.
Oh yeah,
but it's often quieter, so it requires listening. But I think the biggest thing is not about discovering that; it's about trusting that. That's my viewpoint, anyway.
But you're actually talking to to say that it is always available is true.
Yeah.
But if you're a lot of people just aren't if you're not even stepped onto the spiritual path, that hasn't awoken in yourself, you're full of mind, absolutely irrepressibly full of egoic and viewpoints and structures and energetic, all that.
Yeah,
you're right. It's so distant. And that's why it's a spiritual path, and that path is a path of purification and refinement to sort of bring the egoic mind to a point, and then purify that so that the intuitive spacious being can be recognized. But there's a whole strata going from a deep egoic existence to being quiet and attuned enough to be able to apprehend the intuitive light. It is always there, but there could be a whole.
I think at the heart, I guess what I'm saying is it is at the heart of all of our, let's say, moves of life.
Yeah.
But it can be absolutely occluded and covered over and not seen and not consciously known in that way.
Yeah.
But I think, so I think you're right in saying that for a lot of people it can be completely occluded. But once you do tune into what that is, I think so what I was trying to say is the next challenge is trusting that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and following it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because often it is not something that naturally makes sense in terms of the mind's view, rational ideas of should.
Absolutely. I mean, operating from that, I would make the case that it's almost invariably at odds with the mind. Not invariably, but often. Often you go, the mind goes, this is a yes.
Yeah.
And I can feel it. I know it. Or no, this definitely isn't. And yet all the rational thing says it should be.
Exactly.
So on what basis do we make our decisions?
Yeah. And so there's where it becomes...
It's a faith. It's an act of faith to trust that light rather than what all the conditioned voices are telling you.
And I think in order to trust that light, there has to be some element of courage to meet fear.
Yeah.
Because fear is often the gateway between you and that step into the unknown, that faith of stepping into the unknown of this doesn't make sense and yet I feel drawn here.
And of course the mind is at the point, so you've got like the intuition, you're in tune with that, the intuition to move in a certain way, in a certain direction. And the mind will go, oh, no, that's not right, because Because reasons, and
you're stepping out of the known.
Exactly. So you're stepping into an unknowing knowing. It's a paradox. It is a knowingness, but it offers no qualification for itself except its own presence.
Yeah, and so I think certainly look back at my experience and sort of see those times in which I haven't trusted that intuitive knowingness, that guiding light. Which is a very quiet voice, but a very, very strong, steady, powerful voice. Just it doesn't present itself so loudly as the ego. And those times where I failed to enact and trust that voice have been often to do with that gateway of fear, have often been to do with that stepping into the unknown beyond what I know. Beyond the norms, the cultural, even spiritual norms.
Well, fear is a terrible signal for telling you whether a particular move is right or wrong.
Yeah,
I mean, it was evolved in the right way. I mean, if you've got the classic, if you've got a saber-toothed tiger coming up and coming on you, and you've got fear, then that's really going to help you out. But the fears that hold us back are the egoic fears that seem to be a problem.
It's not life and death; it's wanting to be safe. In terms of a psychological...
We're talking psychologically safe, aren't we? Or something like that. Yeah. But the fear is felt in the same way. And so we feel... So often there's something will be absolutely the right thing for us. We go, yes, that. But then the fear kicks in. And if you don't recognize that the actual signal to take notice of is the intuitive yes, that the knowingness that this is correct and right for me, and then the fear, the presence of the fear is by no means a signal. No. You can get your house in order and go, oh, okay. It's difficult to sort of hold that fear or to face that fear with the knowingness that, okay.
The courage to move, to include that fear and yet move beyond it.
But it's like we this is about the hierarchy. Fear is important to listen to, but not at the cost of your intuitive light. Yeah. Because if your intuitive light is saying, yeah, this, and the fear is saying, no, well, there again, we're into the hierarchy. Yeah. Which one are you going to defer to? And I get it because I've done this myself. I'll probably still do it myself, kind of pull back from something because, but I wonder whether the life, in a sense, the growth into and beyond awakening is about coming into congruence with that light and action of the knowing. And as you say, it's one thing to tune into it, to hear it, and then the real rubber meeting the road is follow it, follow the light, because it's all well to tune into your intuition and your intuitive sense, but following it is where the fruit comes. And it's actually often goes against what seems to make sense.
Yeah, and I think that another fear that can come up there is a fear of that path forward being a mistake. Mm-hmm. And I think something that's been really valuable to me is really grokking, and I mean that in a real visceral way, that there aren't mistakes. There are learnings, and sometimes those learnings are really unpleasant learnings, yes. But if there's an intuitive sense to go in a certain direction, even if that direction leads you to a dead end, a seeming dead end, to not view that as a mistake and actually see that there's some great deep learning in that. Even the dead end has great value and wealth to it in light of growth, not comfort.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing is lost. No experience were lost or wasted, because everything leads to learning, and therefore growth. It's like that idea. Everything is satsang ultimately, which is a beautiful way of saying everything is truth, actually, and everything is an encounter with truth. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
So
it is. Yeah. It is even the murky, muddy waters. There's so much to learn from that.
Yeah, I mean, you don't always know what it is.
No, God, no.
but we're
if only.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there came a point where I stopped being afraid of the muddy, murky waters, though, or rather. Fear could be there too.
Right.
But courage and faith was stronger.
Surrender.
Yeah. God, so the further I sort of walk this life, the more and more I recognize how much of this is about surrender.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Wheeling back a little bit about purpose and calling and what was it? Service.
Yeah.
That idea. I've really come to see more and more. My life is very little about what I want, and it's about what I'm called to. Yeah. It
entirely, actually.
It really is irritatingly so. Only in as much as your desires, let's say, or your inclinations can get in alignment with what you're actually being called to do in a very real and
really practical.
That can be very, very tricky to discern sometimes, and it's confusing. Really, but this,
But each sort of seeming quotes wrong step actually reveals more clarity of what the next necessity is, the next calling, the next way forward is.
Yeah, and I think it was funny. I had a little sort of back and forth with a friend the other day about the symbolism of the cross, and we have this is so rich, and it's a very old symbol that predates even Christianity, but even so, and one of it for me was something like the vertical is something like our vertically integrated present moment reality, from depending on how you invert this particular thing, whether you see it as coming from the highest down to low or coming up from the foundations, that depending on how that vertical is. But it's this now, how we're, all the different layers of our being existing in congruence, in integration. This for me is but with spiritual embodiment. It's getting all these layers of, from our subtlest aspects to our grossest aspects and everything in between, and all these layers of, our emotional life, our psychological life, our embodied life, our environmental life. It's all sort of stacked. And that lovely, when that, I think embodiment is about bringing all that into integration, vertically integrated, so everything's in congruence with everything else. So there's that. And then there's the horizontal, which is really about how we quotes exist over time. You know, we're a being with a past, a present, and a likely future, and we exist really at the eye of our living awareness is right in the intersection of those two aspects. And you've called it, you know, the vertical is like the divine, and you know, and the horizontal is like the human, the being,
or the depth and the breadth.
So sometimes I found that it wasn't so easy, you know, being in the, you know, the thing is with awakening, by any other name, what one finds is that awareness is always on, and life becomes very immediate, raw, and present. And you know, to check into where you are and what's true and what you even want, or which way you know, you're always but the very nature of the present moment awareness part of that awakening is that things become very presentist. Like everything's judged by virtue of the present. This, and that's correct, obviously. And as we're talking about the intuition that we, you know, tap into is a function of that presentness, that present moment. The bias of attention is obviously in the present moment. It's always in the present moment, and that becomes your sort of guiding light. But so much so that actually, if you lived from there alone, you can miss things. And often you can get perspectives, really useful perspectives, by tracking how you function over time and what's happened over time, and you start to see patterns that aren't so evident in if you're just super fixed in the moment. Yes, I live in the moment. That's really useful and powerful. And
but if there's a negation,
but
of time, or the horizontal in this example, that can also.
A good example was diet. Seems like a trivial example, but I had a diet that wasn't working for me and was I would say causing all sorts of issues. But whenever I would check in on, and it emerged really post awakening. It was in the years following these last several years that it's become obvious, and I've been able to deal with it. But if I was just always looking to how I felt in the moment, I would go, "Hey, I'm blessed, man," which was true and is true. You know, when I kind of look at the deepest, most part, I go, "Yeah, it's all good. I'm all bliss. I'm all bliss."
That's like the vertical.
It's the vertical. Yeah, it's tuned into the now and the bliss of the now, rooted in the ground of being. You know, there it is in the depth. Oh, fine, bliss, good. But it was only when I sort of surveyed, expanded that view through time, in a sense, I go, actually, no, there are issues here. There are issues around how my diet is detracting from my motivations and my inclinations and my general sense of well-being. And, you know, I realized that, the way I eat was actually holding me back in certain ways. Now, that viewpoint isn't actually, wasn't fully available in the present moment, in the vertical. It needed the horizontal. It needed the mind to actually go and survey a little bit over time to identify certain patterns that when I did change things, yes, I still felt great in the moment, but something else shifted, another layer, which only shows up over time. I know it's an odd thing.
No, but to me, it's that 100% divine, 100% human.
Yeah,
it's
right.
That's what we're talking about.
Where we are the being, an embodied, awakened being, is the intersection of that.
Exactly, and so it's not either or. It is both and there's the
fully
symbol
divine,
of
fully human.
Yeah, the symbol of the cross. It's like we are fully the depth and we are fully the breadth. Yeah. And the breadth has elements like time and space and, all of these sort of experiences of time, experiences of life, sorry. And the depth has other qualities to it. And we are both.
We are both.
At this moment, at this expression, this experience, and this embodiment, we are both. And to negate that or to say that that's not true, to me, there is a subtle and pernicious separation in life or duality in life that says this, not that.
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of it in the spiritual world, and particularly, and I say spiritual, but particularly in the world of enlightenment. There's a subtle. I've talked about this before. It's my bugbear. There's a subtle nihilism to it.
Yeah.
That is in a sense living only in that vertical.
Yes.
For want of a better sort of metaphor, it's like, oh no, there's nothing to do, no one to do it. I exist purely as a present moment appearance. Mm-hmm. True.
Very true.
All true.
Yes.
But it doesn't account for the continued existence in time and space.
Yeah. As some people call the dream.
In the dream. And the dream, that's the dimension of the dream. A dream that has a dream past, a dream present, and a dream future.
Exactly.
But that's still going on. And it's not a mistake.
Far from it. I think it's actually
this is
through that we know the depth. And vice versa. Through the depth, we know the breadth.
Right. Well, there's this idea that you see among interpretations of the non-dual reality get put forward as the facts of it. Yeah. Now, the fact of it is, yes, it's all an appearance in the present moment. Yes, it's not. Yes, it's dreamlike in its substance. It's it's
temporary.
It's
not solid in the way that we conceive it to be.
Exactly. But that to say it's meaningless, useless, purposeless, to be dismissed,
and doesn't exist.
That's an interpretation, or doesn't. Well, yes. I mean, you have to qualify.
You do.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Well, as a permanent thing, no. But that's a misapprehension.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that no particular relative appearance lasts. It can barely be said to exist, actually. Just that, like any moment arises and passes so fast that it's gone as it comes. It's passing away with such rapidity, just as it arises. And if you look closely, you can't pin it down. Actually,
well, there's the phrase, nothing ever happened.
Yeah, exactly. But is it meaningless on that basis? Can you can it be concluded that is necessarily meaningless? Because however we look at it, the experience of this dream is one of growth. It's one of increasing insight. It can be difficult. It can be exhilarating. It offers up so much incredible insight and so many gifts. I just don't like to dismiss it as meaningless, because there's so much meaning wrapped up in it. And just because that meaning, let's say, is passing, mm-hmm. even so, I just don't see it from that viewpoint. I see it as filled with meaning, and I see it as the way this divine being is showing up. Yep. And it's not just showing up in some random way, showing up in this incredible, rich, infinitely complex, sophisticated, and multi-dimensional way. It's incredible. I don't mean like portals dimensions. I mean the dimensions of the felt experience and of the mind, the senses, all these different aspects and dimensions of our layers of being,
and subtleties.
It's so rich, so full of creative intelligence. and awareness and aliveness that I can't so easily dismiss it. Yes, it's dreamlike, so I guess my point is that yes, we exist on those two dimensions, and or those two axes, at the intersection of those two axes, and it's important that both of them are required, and that both of them how reality shows up, and
it's like to only focus on the vertical, and to negate the horizontal is, I believe, a blind spot.
Well, I think it's a disembodiment, actually,
exactly.
Isn't it, or something like that? Like it's
exactly.
a lack of integration of that aspect of being. We know it's impermanent, sure, but
to say that it isn't, when our experience on that level, at least, reveals that it is on that level.
And it's funny because I see that, there are teachers who teach that just that pure, that non-dual vertical axis, it's just all this, man.
Radical
but
non-dualists.
What? Yeah, I wonder about them. I wonder, because I'm like, well, how do you deal with, and how do you respond then to, how do they respond to life continuing to, rise and fall and happen? And there is a fine line there.
Mm-hmm.
There is a fine line there. I don't want to reify the dream too much, right?
No.
I don't want to make it into some, oh no, the dream is super. It is the important. No,
No.
It is the transient passing aspect of our own being, though, and as such, it is part of our own being.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to sever that part away from my deep self. I'm gonna, as the wholeness of myself, live from my ground and embody my passing and growing and my experiencing self.
I used this example in a session earlier today where, talking about the wholeness and not like always focusing on the wholeness of it. And I'm like, okay, so the body is the wholeness in this example. The body's a whole. Yeah, you've cut your finger. You're not going to treat your whole body. You're going to put a plaster on the finger. Sometimes life requires us to focus in on the point value of some, temporary, but expression nonetheless. And it is not other than the wholeness.
No.
There's no either or. It's just that wholeness is being experienced in the, so another example would be the ocean is being experienced in the drop in that moment. And to me, they're not at odds with each other. To treat the finger is to treat the body in that moment.
I think the bigger, the issue is in a sense in this let's say non-dual world in particular, that there's a sort of an experienced denialism that goes on, and it's funny. We have a friend who a Twitter friend, and we've been back and forth, awakened guy, and he was very, I wouldn't say resistant, but he would. Well, let me give an example. He would say something like, when I would tweet something about the nature of this experience being dreamlike and being made of consciousness. He says, "Yeah, but tell me that when you've been hit by a bus, right?" And he wasn't wrong.
No.
So I don't care how non-dual you are saying, oh man, nothing's ever happening, and nothing to do and no one to do it, and it's all a dream. True, get hit by a bus then. Now it doesn't just I'm not saying it diminishes the fact that yes, this is still all consciousness and it is all a dream, but it has sufficient reality that you have to contend with and include in your own sense of your own reality.
And more than just contend with and include, I view this reality, this dreamlike experience of life, as the means to which recognize our unchanging,
right? It's
divine
through the
nature.
Yes, it's how it. Well, what did Maharishi talk about? Or perhaps it's Vedic. Consciousness or being is the source, course, and goal of all. And it's, and I think the Christian thing is God. Let's say is where we are born and have our being and return to. It's part of it. I guess I just don't like this idea that you can. Or I don't agree with the idea that you can necessarily sort of dismiss the appearance of reality with a wave of the hand, when the fact is you're probably having some very intense and rich experiences. And I think we've been here before. It marks a sort of, I think, a difference between early stage awakening and the fullness. The difference
maturity.
Between, like say self-realization in the sense of discovering the silent nature of being as self, and full non-duality, unity, where it's all that. How could you possibly deny any of it? It's simply the way that I, as a being, as being itself, I'm showing up.
Yeah. It is you are both everything and nothing.
Yeah.
It is the recognition that there is truly no separation, no hierarchy, no like this is better, this is higher, this is lower. Yeah. The higher is the divine, the lower is the human. Instead, the recognition that it is two sides of the very same coin. One is a dynamic expression of form and experience and senses and layers and levels and time and space and all the rest of it, and the other is a description of the empty absolute
deep ground of being.
Yeah, exactly. And then they're not one or the other. We are not one or the other. We are both. It's not two things.
Yeah.
Consciousness at rest, consciousness at play.
They coexist. So I don't know how we got over here.
No, I was just thinking the same thing.
Honestly, I guess it all returns to this at the end, doesn't it? We end up turning into some sort of re-establishment satsang of the principles of existence and being and what it is that we are and how it is that we appear to function.
But here's the thing: is like I feel we are constantly talking of the most simplest fundamentals of reality in multiple ways, in a myriad of ways. You come at it from any which direction, you still come to the same fundamental truth, let's call it, with a capital T. And so to swing back round to this sort of hierarchy, let's forget about values for the moment, but hierarchy of truths even. There are relative truths and absolute truths. There are truths that coexist on certain levels that are transcended yet included into these deeper absolute truths. And
nested within them.
Yeah, much of, I think, what we're talking about, however which way we come at it, is speaking to the paradox that is transcended to recognize there is no paradox.
Well, it's like that. I mean, the discussion about things like free will and non-doership, these ideas, there's a both and-ness about, actually, maybe I'll go a different way, not quite both and, because I don't want to posit that free will and non-free will coexist in equal status.
No.
It's more like the free will, quotes, is nested within non-doership.
Well, in the same way, relative truths are nested within absolute truth.
But something came up yesterday. I was talking about another angle into this whole idea of non-doership and no free will, is that at every turn, every decision we make is by definition the best we've got.
Yes.
Even if we feel it's not, it is.
Yes.
It's definite, and that's not just like a general spongy kind of observation. It is precise. It is the very, on every level, everything taken into account, whether we know it or not. It's the best we got.
Yeah, there's no if. There's no what if.
No, that is literally the best, and that's the direction we're going in. And even if it's another thing, that was the. And so, even though we're, say, quotes, choosing that, if we're at every turn are choosing the best that we've got, then where's the free will in that? It's like we're endlessly falling into this inevitability, and this seems to be freedom because we seem to be choosing. But if the basis of our choice is always like ultimately the best that we've got at that point, there's no free will in it. So that's where the paradox kind of seems to show up.
Well, and also but
it's just another a line of inquiry to notice that even though we're seem to be acting freely, the way that we operate is such that those free choices aren't really free choices. They're inevitable. They're free, but they're inevitable. And
so this is in relation to that, but maybe slight sidestep as well to that. It's the idea of, well, who's the one that you're attributing the choice to? Like, who are you in all of this? So that's goes alongside that.
Yeah.
That sort of inquiry of,
But even if
you take yourself to be an ego mind that is, coming up with thought, okay, well, that's that truth on that relative level. We can see where that makes sense, where that sort of seemingly fits in.
But you can see how even the activity of choice is itself determined by an intrinsic mode of choosing, right? Even if you go, okay, you take yourself to be a person, you take yourself to make, even if you are seemingly making those choices itself are running in a certain, according to a certain principle at every turn. And so where's the freedom in that? Where's the freedom in that will? So, and that's okay, because that in that way you can see that, well, I do have the freedom to choose, but I'm always only going to choose that which seems to be the best thing at any given time, consciously, all added up. These are the dimensions, biologically, consciously, unconsciously, emotionally. It all adds up.
Yeah. I
think Roger Castillo talks kind of, quite lucidly to this idea. It's the we're at any moment we're a combination of our genetics, our conditioning, and the environment, and hit the mic again, and so the totality of those add up to complete inevitability, complete determinism.
Yeah.
Even though at the time it feels like you're making the choices, but those choices are made according to the precise algorithm. Let's say the mathematical precision of life itself.
Yeah.
I don't know. Why we keep bouncing around here? I mean, we're talking about but go on.
Well, I was just going to bring it back to kind of where we started out this whole conversation, which is to trust that inner guiding light, and that expression of who and what you are is the only option.
Yes.
It is absolutely the way forward, is to recognize that you are the unique expression, and therefore choices. That expression comes from those seeming choices, and to really fall into a repose with that, a gratitude for that, a surrender to that, a surrender to who and what you are in each and every moment.
If you can.
If you can, yeah.
Which is a function
but if you can, the whole thing feels
I think
a lot easier and more joyful.
Well, I think if you can, then it's a sign of that kind of, let's say, that grace bringing you home.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. I mean, we talked about this idea that, you know, that coming into a place of surrender, with reality, of non-resistance, of deeper sense of trust, and all these kind of things, spiritual practice and settling into your own nature. These are symptoms of your return home to your own nature, which we call grace. It's like it's moving us, it's orchestrating our return home, and at every turn.
It's just not linear and sensical sometimes.
Right. It's
and
unique.
So there's where that leap of faith seemingly is present.
Yes.
In each and every moment. I was just talking about it in my last satsang, talking about what is this leap of faith. And for some, there is a moment or many moments of needing to take a leap of faith. But I think to one that is sort of seated in their own nature, it's a constant leap of faith. It's like a constant, and I would use the word surrender there. It's a constant open palmedness to life.
It's the free fall.
Yeah, they're not landing anywhere.
No, you're never landing. Yeah.
And so it came up, someone was asking, well, you know, I don't recognize that leap of faith in my life. And I'm like, that's because you're living it.
You're living it, yeah. They were awake, right?
Yeah.
They're living that free fall, that you're living in faith. Yeah. You like as a description of your...
Yeah. And so for others that maybe they're not quite stabilized in that place of living in that leap of faith, that free fall, it does feel like a big deal. It does, and there's where that gateway of fear comes in. It's like it does feel like an event. It does feel like a letting go that needs to happen. And there's a sort of an in and out of that mode, and so they feel big.
And of course, even post awakening, there can be little pockets of it as well.
Absolutely.
And that we're talking about. I was talking about this, about how, you know. My conception of reality is that it seems to be that life itself, the whole the reality that we're presented with is orchestrated to seek out those places where we're still not integrated, giving us situations that why am I getting this situation again and again? Why why is that repeating on me? Well, you know, and there's the cliche. Well, you haven't learned your lessons yet. You know, if it's a problem, it means that there's in your heart or some reactivity there, or it means that it needs the light, and so life is actually showing you. Yeah,
they're gifts.
Yeah, they're gifts. Like a difficult. It's like it's
far from life having it out. You know, having something against you that keeps showing up these things that are causing trouble in your life. Far from life being against you, it's actually life literally revealing where more light is needed.
Because without that particular situation, that particular wound that we might have that, oh God, I didn't even know I had that. Oh my God, where did that come from?
Oh God, I thought I dealt with that. That's the other voice.
Right.
Oh gosh, really? Have I got to go through this again?
So it's, life itself, which is our own consciousness, and it's this mechanism of perfecting us, actually. In I know that's just a tricky word to use, but it is about purifying and refining and,
And often that sort of spiral of coming back.
Perfecting. I'm not saying there's ever a perfect, maybe, but it's perfecting. It is that cycling back, growing, deepening, purifying, refining, opening, expanding, evolving. Wonderful.
Yeah, ever changing.
Yeah.
You cannot look to find balance or a final resting place because that's what the mind wants to find and thinks that it needs to find in order to find safety, of certainty. But there isn't just a single point, a status point that we get to that's okay, we're done now.
Yeah. No, it's not.
Life on that level that we're talking about right now is going to constantly change and evolve. There is nowhere to land on that level of life.
Well, it's like that thing I wrote the other week about no wrong notes. That idea that if you're playing music and so you something dissonant arises, if you stopped it there, you'd go, oh, that was a bum note. But the next note will redeem that note, and the next, and the next, and the next. And no matter how far off balance, this idea of balance, how far off balance you go, the next always can redeem it all. And so we're living in this process of flowing redemption, as long as you don't try to pin it down. The moment you try to pin it down, it's a good or bad, right or wrong.
Exactly.
But if you keep open, it's like the story of the Chinese farmer, with the sun and the horses and all that. He finds a horse. Great. Well, great news, farmer. Yeah, we'll see. And then the horse disappears. Oh, great news. Oh, bad news. Oh, yeah, we'll see. And it's the idea. It's endless.
We shall see.
The next will determine. And so you just keep living forward into that and never resolving, never. That's the freedom. The freedom's in the free fall. The freedom's in the never landing.
Yeah, the constant opening to life as it is in each moment.
The problems happen when we try to pin it down.
Yeah.
Okay, hold that there. Pin that down, hold that there. Keep that like that. Yeah.
Well, you're going against the very nature of existence, which causes suffering. To be in antithesis to what is to suffer.
Yeah. Yep.
And you could describe meditation and also the lived reality of awakening as a constant opening to what is, a constant description of a falling into what is.
Yeah, it's that surrender, isn't it? It's that abandon. I like that. It's very Sufi-esque, the sort of abandon to the bliss of the beloved, of the self, just constantly. It kind of has a really nice trusting, surrendered dance about it.
Yeah, it's to fall in love with life. And it's not to fall in love with life in terms of good or bad. It's not to fall in love with life in terms of right or wrong. It is just to fall in love with experience and life itself. To recognize that you are that. And so it is to fall in love with the self.
Okay. Nice to be back. We're gonna wrap it up there, and we'll hope you, if you like it. If you feel like sharing it, share it, and do subscribe if you wanna know when we release the next one. Well, hopefully we won't take a month next time.
Yeah, we're aiming to be back a bit more regularly now. And yeah, as usual, if you have topics or things that you would like us to explore, yeah, we'd really love to hear from you.
Okay. Bye for now.